All right. Hi, everyone. It looks like we're getting some sign-ons already. So since we have a lot to cover, I'll jump right in. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Cece Mortar, and I'm the Director of Business Development and Programs for the Steamboat Springs Chamber. I want to start by giving a quick shout out to our co-host for this session, the Routt County Economic Development Partnership, and our Business Education Series sponsors, Mountain Valley Bank, UC Health, Northwest Data Services, the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority, and Routt County. A couple of house cleaning items. Please switch your chat to everyone so that everyone can see your chat. And I also just want to let you know that you can put questions either in the chat or the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, but the Q&A function does let you put in questions anonymously. So feel free to use that. We'll take questions periodically throughout, but I encourage you to put them in as you have them so that you don't forget. I am honored to introduce our speakers today. Josh Wormser is a frequent chamber speaker and a certified business coach and growth advisor for small business owners. His areas of focus include revenue growth, employee productivity, retention, time management, leadership, and succession planning. And joining Josh is Ben Brickwig, a Colorado business attorney and advisor who helps local business owners protect what they've built and plan their next chapter. Ben specializes in succession, exit strategy, and deal execution for Main Street businesses across the Rockies. So with that, Josh, I'll let you take the reins and get started.
Okay, let me share my screen. Hold on one second. Where's my screen? All right, let's try it now. All right, do you see that?
We do. It's just not in presenter view if you want to
Let's put the
switch.
slideshow on. How does that look? Okay, well, good morning and thank you for joining today. And we're going to discuss succession planning. The timing is good because it's never too early to start thinking about succession. You want to lead well today while preparing for tomorrow. Many owners are too busy running their business. They think they've got plenty of time with succession being far off, or they don't know where to start. But life and business are unpredictable, so it's really good to have a practical guide on how to move forward. And that's the point of today's webinar. So I'm Josh, and I'm thrilled to be with you on this beautiful, chilly steamboat fall morning. I'm a full-time resident, and my wife and I moved here 3 years ago, and we love it. We love to support the local community. She's a preschool teacher, and I help small business owners in areas where they could use some strategic guidance, typically growth. And I also work with my clients to form an exit strategy if they're towards the end of the life cycle of their business or career. And I help them create a succession plan, which can be any time. It's pretty rare that my clients aren't already considering succession at some point when they work with me. I grew up in a family-run manufacturing business. I was the third generation, and during my tenure, we made a strategic acquisition of a competing company, and then we sold our business a few years later. So I've been on the buy and the sell side of the table. I went through a lot of emotions of selling a business that was my family's identity for 55 years. And we made some mistakes that are the most common ones many business owners make, and you're going to hear them today. We definitely could have done better. So I'm hopeful that you guys can get a few tips to steer you in the right direction. So the first part of the agenda, which I'm going to cover, is about making the decision to sell or transition out of your business, the best and worst times to do it, and what steps you can take to start the process. These are areas I often work on with clients. And Ben's going to come in and join us, and he's going to discuss valuations, some other great tips. Ben is a great resource, has extensive experience working with businesses in Colorado mountain towns, and I believe all of us can benefit from his expertise. Then we're going to go over some transition options, how to manage and lead through the transition itself, and some legal and tax considerations. All right, so let's go. So succession planning is really preparing the business for future leadership and continuity. Ownership succession is planning for the transfer of ownership. So we're going to cover both of these today because both are part of the plan for most business owners. And you want your company prepared and figure out the best ownership transfer options to achieve your goals. Now, starting a business can be hard, but selling a business is often the hardest decision you're going to make. Some of us are just ready, or you have a life change that brings immediate clarity. But for many, it's a really tough call, and it should be. Often the better your business is doing, the harder the decision. Your business is often or your identity, a sense of purpose. It could be the capstone of a lifetime of work. It might be how you're defined in the community by others, and the source of lifelong relationships. So, of course, it has a definite impact on your financial future. And in most cases, once you sell your business, you're not going to be able to reverse that decision. So some people see a sale of a business as a pure transaction, but it's very much a business and life decision. So there's many factors to consider, which is why it's really important to have a plan. And the best time to formulate a plan is now, if you haven't started already, or at least 3 years before a planned exit if possible. The most common mistake a business owner will make is waiting too long and not being prepared. Now, you don't have to freak out because you don't have to sell your business today. You don't have to execute a plan today, but it's really good to be prepared. In my business, my family business, my father had a health issue, and it kind of sped up the process, and we decided to sell the company. We were not prepared, and it ended up negatively affecting our valuation. So you definitely do not want to wait until you want to sell to prepare for sale, because a rushed exit almost always reduces value and increases stress. We often hear an analogy about planting a tree when referring to succession planning because it takes time, and the benefits are worth the wait. Plant seeds today to benefit down the road. So give yourself time and definitely prepare. Now, some trigger points that lead many of us to start considering a plan may include, or when you should start looking at a plan. If your business is the primary source of your income, your wealth, and I'm going to add time here, diversification in life is good. And sometimes taking some chips off the table to preserve long-term financial independence is meaningful. Life is short. So if you're spending 70, 80 hours a week trying to run a business and it's affecting your health, your relationships, or your happiness, it might be time to consider change. There's times where you want or need to offer an ownership stake to a key partner or employee for continuity or growth. It's still considered a succession plan if you stay with the business but groom others to take over time. You may be considering retirement, relocation, or taking a step back. Those are some more obvious triggers. In a family business, the next generation may be ready to take over, or it becomes clear they won't. I've seen situations where, a business was being saved for the kids until the kids made it clear they didn't want the business. The business may reach a point where fresh leadership is required to take it to the next level. This requires some self-awareness from the owner, which often comes when more capital is required or technology advances are hard to keep up with for the owner. One of the most common value detractors in a business is dependence on the owner. You're going to hear this a few times today. As soon as the business primarily depends on you for its success, it's time to start planning for what happens when you're not there. All right, so some personal factors. Since this is such an emotional decision, it's good to go through some exercises or tap into assessment tools, which can help bring clarity to the process. For some these days, it's about their freedom number. It's about, how much money do I need to support my ideal lifestyle? And then once I achieve that amount, I'm out. And it's an important exercise because most of us are planning to live a lot longer than the previous generation. If we're going to live into our 90s, is retiring at 60 or 65 even feasible? For others, they care about the impact that their business has on others they care about, and how an ownership change may alter those relationships. So some owners will hold on to a business longer than they want to for the benefit of others they care about in the business. The three-legged stool helps clarify if you're emotionally prepared, financially ready, and business ready. If so, good time to start the process. And then I work with a great assessment tool called the CVI. It's the Core Value Index, and it helps identify what a business owner should consider as their next path or chapter in life, based on what tasks that they're most suited for. And this is a valuable tool because a lot of folks that they worry about what they will do next. They fear the unknown. Their business defines them. So, tap into resources to help you make this decision, because, the reason that you want to think this through and have a plan is so you don't make any, reactive, emotional, or impulsive decisions that might lead to outcomes you'll regret later on. Quick sales often lead to quick regrets. So, running a business is hard. It can be exhausting. And some owners assume that selling the business is the answer. They're burnt out and they believe the best way to improve their situation is to step aside. But they might do so without addressing the root cause of the burnout to see if it can be mitigated. Coaches, consultants, and others, they can help with time management and delegation and hiring and areas that contribute mostly to owner burnout. You could go through short-term financial pressures that they might appear difficult to overcome, such as a cash crunch or a debt issue. Explore financing options, cut expenses, or restructure before giving up your long-term value in your business. A lot of owners will panic when they see shifts in the market, a new competitor coming to town, or economic downturns, and they feel like they have to sell to get out while they can. But market cycles change, and with a plan, many businesses can adapt and thrive again. If you've been in business a while, you've probably gone through these market swings. You've probably gone through COVID. At the time, it can be really hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel, but you eventually get through it. You might have disputes with partners or employees or family members that make you just want to get out. But once again, selling in frustration or anger is an emotional decision, not a strategic one. I see often some try to time the sale, or they'll sell right before major growth, or wait too long before the business has already started to decline. The best time to sell is often when you don't have to. And then, sometimes these pressures I'm mentioning, they're justifiable and they may be potential signs, but they can also be temporary situations or emotions that should not lead to permanent decisions. Okay, so owners may mistime the right time to sell because of a mix of emotional, strategic, or market-driven reasons. Waiting too long, once again, trying to time this thing and hold on until your business is at the absolute peak. By the time you recognize that moment, it's already passed. Being emotionally attached can cloud your judgment. You might think the right time it's the right time, or you might think the time is not right because it's not time for you to give up control. And that's okay because it's your business, but it's going to affect your valuation if the business is ready and the buyer is ready, but you're not ready. Many owners will misjudge the time it takes to go through the selling process, and then they rush it and try to sell too quickly before their house is in order. And that's going to lead buyers looking for a lower valuation because they see it as more risky. Health and life events can always, force a sale, and you usually do not get an optimal value in those situations. I have a client who's solely focused on the day-to-day operations and growing his business. He had an opportunity to sell his business, was completely caught off guard, tried to put something together to go through the sale, and then by the time that happened, circumstances had changed. And then some owners they believe their business is more than it's worth more than it is, holding out for an unrealistic number. And by the time they adjust their expectations, the buyer interest or favorable conditions may have shifted. So just keep in mind, the right time to sell is usually earlier than most owners think it is. And the more buyer ready your business is, the more it's worth and the more you control the timing. So once again, buyer ready is the key. All right, so enough negativity here. Let's talk about the good times, the best times to sell. So often the best time to sell is when three things align. The owner is ready, the business is performing well, and the market is favorable. But here's the thing. Many people do not want to walk away when the business is performing and the market is favorable. When things are rolling, we don't want to let go of success. We think more good times are ahead. People tend to gravitate towards pleasure and away from pain. So when it's not going well, we want to get out, but when it's going well, we want to stay. It can be this is difficult emotionally. And I often kind of refer to an analogy of let's say you're going to a casino to gamble and play blackjack. And you're winning, you got a big stack of chips. No one wants to walk away when they got a big stack of chips, right? They don't even think about walking away until their chips stack goes down and down. And then they start thinking, I'll just keep playing, right? And they end up losing much or most of their winnings, or they walk away with nothing. So this is an emotional thing here. And that's once again, why you want to be exit ready so you can move quickly when the stars align, when the business is ready, the market is favorable, and you are ready to move on. All right, so the good news is we do not have to make the decision in isolation. There are resources that you're going to tap into for information and clarity, and getting feedback from trusted advisors can prevent many mistakes. Your CPA, accountant can run retirement projections for you, analyze tax impacts, and show you if a sale is going to meet your financial goals and needs. M&A advisors are great resources that can provide insight into market conditions, valuation multiples, appetites of buyers, and an objective picture of what the business is worth. Your attorney will advise on legal structures, contracts, and potential estate implications. And of course, family and key stakeholders in the business can provide support. Running a business can be lonely. If it wasn't, I would have fewer clients. So, and the topic of succession is not something that we want to discuss openly with everyone. So lean on the people you trust and have them give you their perspective and insight. You want to have good advisors that know the markets, that know exits. So if you question that any of these folks might not be the right fit, well, ask for referrals from others that have had successful exits. Ask for referrals from others that you know and trust. You want to have the right advisors on your team. Okay, so once you have made the decision to sell or transition, it's time to prepare and get your house in order. First, make sure your books are accurate and up to date and professionally prepared. Eliminate personal expenses running through the business if you've been doing that, and get 3 to 5 years of financial statements ready. If your books are a mess, there is likely a mess elsewhere. If you're going to buy a home, for example, and you go to a showing and the house is a mess, the bed's not made, it's unkept, you're going to wonder if that home is well maintained. You're going to become worried about the things you can't see. First impressions obviously matter in anything, and your financials are often the first step in evaluating your business. So you definitely want to clean it up. Ben is going to cover some of these other areas. One area that I want to touch on is personal preparation. Clarify what's next after the sale. Is it retirement? Is it a new business? More family time, hobbies, etc., right? Assess whether the deal is going to meet your needs financially and personally, and be emotionally ready. Because for some folks, handing over their business is like handing over a child. Okay, it's very difficult for them. And if you're not in a good state of mind and looking forward to what's next, there's a chance that it's going to be a more stressful process, and you're going to be less likely to see it through. I've seen a scenario where a former client of mine was not personally prepared with the right mindset to actually go through a sale. And he backed out in the 11th hour after spending a lot of time, a lot of money on his advisors. He made a lot of people unhappy. So while the business has to be ready, the seller has to be emotionally ready as well. So keep that in mind, please. All right, so here's a basic roadmap you can follow. And once again, it's going to depend on the readiness of your business. The first 30 days are about preparation. You want to clarify your goals. You want to clean up the books. You want to define why you're selling. And you want to decide, what are the most important factors in this sale for you? Do you want the highest price? Does the timing make the most difference? Is it your legacy? Is it business continuity? Keep that in mind as you organize your finances and financials and you gather your key documents. Assess the health of your business. Identify areas that could raise red flags and address them early on. This is going to prepare you for that next phase as you work with your advisory team to assess your value. Get a realistic market-based valuation based on industry multiples or your EBITDA. Understand what drives your business value. Is it your growth rate? Is it your recurring revenue? Your customer mix, your brand reputation? What are they buying? And during this time, you want to lock in your key employees or clients. You want to strengthen your management. These are areas that are going to strengthen your value. And then in phase 3, you want to prepare for the market, to market your business and the transition. You're going to build a compelling story about the future growth potential. Once again, make sure that you're emotionally ready. Since these deals, they can take time and patience to get done. And identify how you're going to transition with your customers, your staff, and to a certain degree yourself if you're considering a temporary stay to assist the new owner. And of course, from beginning to end, you want to sustain company performance, to maintain value, and you want to protect confidentiality along the way. So here are the things that you want to avoid as much as possible, which can lead to killing a potential opportunity. And I've witnessed all of these at one point. So we talked about financials. If they're not solid, A lack of trust is going to be likely on the buyer's side. If the business relies primarily on you and you're not committed to staying, it's a scary sight for the potential owner. I mean, even if you are committed to staying, many buyers know that business owners don't like working for others, and this can be a scary sight. If you rely on a few clients or customers to generate much of your revenue, well, what happens if you lose one of them? Some industries are like this, but you want to diversify your customer base as much as possible. In my business, I used to sell product to mass market retail. I did a lot of business with Walmart. They were 45% of our revenue, and there was nothing we could do about it. All right. So what we tried to do was impact the other areas, so a potential buyer would not see. So a buyer would see the bigger picture and not just focus on the customer concentration risk that we had. Since we care deeply about our business, we tend to overvalue it. This is why we need that outside perspective. Some owners only want to sell if they can get their price, but if that's not realistic, a lot of time and money can be spent for nothing. I've seen how poor confidentiality about a pending sale caused a business to lose a key employee, or a client that decided to not renew their contract because they were worried about uncertainty. There's a time for confidentiality and there's a time for transparency, and both really need to be managed effectively. Deal fatigue. It happens on both sides of the table. If a deal to sell a business keeps dragging on or keeps getting renegotiated, when surprises pop up during the due diligence process that slow things down or move the goalpost, can definitely put a deal at risk. The buyer might have financing challenges, and in some cases, there's nothing we can do about it. You do have advisors that can look into your buyer's financing options, but there's also times where I've seen this could have been anticipated, or it was chosen to be ignored and hoping that a deal would get closed. This happens often, or more often, when a key employee or partner tries to purchase the business. And once again, prepare, lean on the experts, and become as objective as possible through the process. Okay, so Ben's going to come on. As a coach, I often bring in trusted advisors to help or advise my clients in areas that are not my specific expertise. And today I'm thrilled that Ben is joining. He's going to talk about some ways to boost your value and some unique insights. And in many cases, this is going to determine if you're able to sell your business. I learned from Ben that 4 out of 5 businesses for sale do not sell. So Ben works with his clients to make sure they fall into the 20% that do. Ben's done work in Steamboat. He's presented in town in previous years. So Ben, I'm going to turn it over to you now, let's do this. Let's see if there's any questions. No questions? Okay, I think we don't have any questions. Well, if anyone has any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat or put them in the Q&A. And if not, we'll keep rolling with Ben. All right, I guess not.
Can you guys unlock my video?
It should be unlocked, Ben.
All right. Well, let's get this going. Well, Josh, thank you for making up all those
Lies?
nice words about me. It's always fun to sit on a webinar like this where I know there's people watching. I can't exactly see what they're doing, so I'm gonna try to crack a handful of jokes and see if I can get anybody to giggle in the comments or something. But I'll tell you before I even get started, I got a couple copies of my book here, and anybody that chooses to engage while we're having some of these conversations, I'm going to send you some goodies up to Cece's office, and she'll get you a copy of it. So everybody can see the screen. So I'm gonna talk today. You can tell already I'm super stuffy and formal, but I'm gonna take a few minutes here and tell you some of the inconvenient truths that go into selling a business, the things that people don't really ever think about, or the parts that people hide and don't tell you. And Josh teased on this, and I want to open with this big, giant, scary, nasty statistic, and that is that 4 out of 5 business owners that try to sell, that go to market, whether they do it on their own or somebody calls them, or some real estate agent says, "Hey, don't worry, guy, I can sell it for you," or the commission halitosis business brokers that seem to call everybody every day. All of these things going into the pile, 4 out of 5 don't sell. And I mean, you think about this for a minute. You've spent at least years in your business, probably decades, and you've built this, and you've got this 80% chance of failure, that 80% chance that you just have to shut it down when you're done. And years of working on this, of helping your clients or your customers, your employees counting on you, the community counting on you, it just vanishes, and it's a waste. And what I want to do, if nothing else today, is give you a couple of tips, a couple of tricks. We don't have a ton of time, but I want to teach you how to be in that 20% that do sell, or better yet, the 20% of the 20% that actually sell on favorable terms, where the owner can walk away and be proud of what they've done, and they have a deal that works not just for them, and it's not just about this big payday, but also about making sure that the legacy continues, or whatever else is important. And part of this, I've created this concept we call exit worthy. And becoming exit worthy means that your business has 3 things: that it's valuable, it's sellable, and it's transferable. And I'll dig into those in a little bit, but really this means that the business is set up for a sale that meets your goals, and it works for a buyer. Buyers actually want to buy it, and it ensures for a smooth transition. And so my mission here, I want to help you build a business that, when it's ready for you to go to market, that you beat the odds and you can get it sold the right way. And I want to point out, actually, that when these businesses that fail to sell, it's not always because the business is bad. A lot of it has to do with the failure to prepare. Buyers come in, and so many times, especially on Main Street kind of companies, we're not talking big Wall Street, big city things, but in small towns, just like Steamboat, buyers come in from a place of fear, and they're not sure where to go, and they start seeing all these red flags sitting around, like messy books, and over dependence on an owner, or a stale market where there's no growth potential, and they just get scared and they walk away. And part of the job of preparing is to help eliminate those red flags, or actually show some of these red flags actually as opportunities for a potential buyer. And that allows you, again, to stack the deck in your favor and become one of these select few companies, one of these businesses that buyers just can't wait to snap up and buy. And so here, becoming exit worthy is owning a business that creates a valuable stream of cash flow, that runs without your daily involvement, and is sellable when the time is right. And so, just who am I and why the hell should you listen to me? Full disclosure, I've got a potty mouth. I promised Cece I'd behave a little bit today. It'll sneak out, but you may know me. I may have spoken to you, or we've met around town, but you may know me as the lawyer guy or the M&A guy. But really, I'm here. The whole reason I do all of this isn't because I learned of these commissions you can make selling companies, or because I joined some brokerage franchise that gave me a business in a box to teach me how to sell companies. This all started for me back in like '98, when my family business failed. My mom was running a training business in the healthcare space, and we had an 8-figure exit on the table, and it failed because we didn't know how to build an exit-worthy business. And I've gone to law school. I'm a licensed attorney. I'm a registered securities rep with FINRA. I've started businesses actually in the snowboard industry right out of high school. I saw an attorney screw up a deal, so I was like, well, screw those guys. I can become one and do way better than they do. But I've been a buyer, I've been a seller, I've been the broker, I've been the attorney. By now I've counseled well over 2,000 owners on exit strategy and building a sellable company, and been directly involved in hundreds of transactions at this point. I'm not super polished. I talk too fast. I get excited, but I figured that would help. We don't have a lot of time, but I love to throw my housekeeping in there. I can't see what you all are doing, but put your phone down. Don't text. I'm going to cover a lot. Cece's graciously offered to distribute the slides to anybody who was here. And there's no stigma. Ask questions. Use the Q&A feature. And if you have questions right here on this slide, I've got my personal email. Email me if you have questions. I'm happy to just answer them. And as we look through some of these top reasons for this 80-20 problem, of the reasons why companies fail to sell, there's a handful, right? But the big three that I see are owner dependence, right? The business cannot run without the owner being there every day and doing all of the things. Number two is what I call the valuation gap, or the misunderstanding of valuation models of, oh, I read on the internet that my company's worth 27 times the revenue, or my buddy was riding up the chairlift with him and he told me he sold his company for this crazy number, which is not quite understanding how valuation applies to your business specifically. And three, the choice of advisors. You need to have people on your team that know what they're doing, that have done this before. You can't go out and hire the lawyer, for example, who helped your idiot brother-in-law with his DUI last year because that lawyer says he also does business. You need people who've been down this path before. And so again, every owner, I don't care who you are, what kind of business you have, you're going to exit your business one day. Does that mean you'll sell it? Maybe, maybe not. Does that mean you'll close it down and someone else will take over the space? Maybe. But you really have two options here. You can do it, and I use this ridiculous example of the guy with the money waving around in his hand. So you can sell it and make some money, or all too often you get wheeled out feet first because you choose not to plan. And I've got stories on stories for this, but we don't have the time to get into all of that today. What I really want to work through with you here is talking about this concept I teach called climbing the value mountains. And you may have seen things on multiples, and Josh talked a little bit about EBITDA and multiples. I don't want to be that technical here. I want you all to leave from this, whether you're here watching or you're catching the replay, to at least have a framework to analyze how buyers see value in the business. And again, I didn't take a class on this. This is now, pushing 25 years of doing this, which I know is tough to believe because I only look like I'm 26, but this is what I've seen. So your mileage may vary. If you ask other advisors, they may say I'm full of shit and I don't know what I'm talking about, but this is how I see it. So buckle up, let's go. First, I want to talk about what I call valuation voodoo. And the question is, if you want to go out and sell your business for this big payday and you're expecting all this money, but have you really ever thought about why a buyer would pay for it? What makes your business worth a premium price instead of a discount? Or why would somebody write you a check, or I guess it's almost 2026, why would somebody wire you money for a price that is more than just what you could sell all the stuff sitting in the store for? Is it the financials, or is there something else? And the question to think through is why would somebody buy this? What makes your business so valuable, so sexy to buyers, so easy to take over that they would actually want to come pay you money for it? And there's three components here, right? It's valuable, it's sellable, it's attractive to buyers, and it's transferable in terms of that they could actually take it over. So think through that as one of the takeaways when you get the slides. Actually take some time to write some of that out and think through it. But I'm going to tell you in quick and simple terms what I think buyers care about. And there's really two things when they're crunching numbers and figuring out what to pay. They care about the history of cash flow. How much money has your business traditionally made? And you'll hear terms like net income, net operating income, seller's discretionary earnings, EBITDA, all of these things. Don't worry so much about that. Just think of one, it's okay that you do your taxes to minimize your tax exposure, right? You write things off in your business. But when buyers see cash flow, we just want to show them how much money they will earn at the end of the year if they owned your business. And the second thing they care about is the likelihood that that cash flow will continue. They don't want to buy your business when you say, "Oh, we've been making all this money," but they don't feel positive. They don't feel confident that that continues when they come and take it over. Which then leads me into here are what the buyers don't care about. They don't care about what you want for your business. They don't care about what you owe the bank. They don't care about how much money you need to retire. They don't even care about what you think it might be worth, right? None of these. And so over the years, what I've created and what we see is what I call this value mountain framework. And we don't have a ton of time to dig into it, but the takeaway from this is I want you to understand and think through that the value of your business, the multiple that somebody will pay, how much somebody will actually want to invest to buy your business, has a whole lot more to do with how much cash your business generates, how profitable it is, and a whole lot less to do with some of these industry multiples. And some of you may have heard this of, oh, I'm in retail, so I'm worth 3.2 times cash flow plus inventory, or I'm in manufacturing, I'm worth 5 times. And that's kind of right in my experience. But what's much more important is some of these factors that we'll talk about that will get you to climb up this mountain. So if you look at this image, and if everybody can see this, when you're in this smaller base camp tier and you're making $0 to $500,000 in profit a year, in general, the standard multiple you would expect to see is 1 times to 3 times. When you get a little bit bigger and your cash flow is $500,000 to $2 million, you can expect the standard of 3 to 4 times of evaluation. And when you get bigger, the numbers get bigger. I'm not going to dwell on that one too much. But the idea here, I've talked about valuable, sellable, transferable, and think of the valuable part, how much cash flow your business makes, has you choose which of these mountains you go on and how much of a multiple you could potentially earn. And remember, this is only the 1 in 5 that sells. The 4 and 5 fall into this discount zone, or what I call the canyon of discount doom and despair, where you don't sell the business. Once in a while, you can have a great business that checks all the boxes and you get a premium. But on average, when we see businesses sell with these sizes of profit, these are the multiples we see. And if you think about it this way, we want you to reach the 20% that sell and the top, and if you want to be in the top 20% of the 20% that sell, you need to have all three of these factors of valuable, sellable, transferable. And think of it like valuable helps you pick which mountain you get to climb. Sellable is how far up that mountain a buyer will want to climb, really how much they will want to pay you. And transferable has to do more with, is there a path to get up the mountain to where they want to be? And when we look at this, I'll dig a little deeper here, but valuable is, call it the foundation. This is when buyers look at your financials, the market position. They're asking, does your business generate consistent cash flow and have a clear path for growth? They're looking for things like healthy margins, predictable revenue, strong market position. And an example would be, just because a business has a strong financial statement and tax returns, but it might be in a shrinking market, they're still going to see risk. You can't just look backwards. There has to be a path forward. When we get into this concept of sellable, what we're really looking at is this business attractive to buyers with minimal risk factors? Will this be irresistible when you put it out on the market, or does it raise too many questions? Can somebody see themselves owning this business? And we look for things like diversified customers, strong contracts, clear market appeal, limited owner involvement. An example here would be something like, if 60% of your revenue comes from only one client, you're way more risky than you are sellable. And then when we get into the last component of transferable, again, this is the path up the mountain, and it has to do with, just because somebody wants to pay for it, they see value, it's sellable, it's sexy, the buyers want to run it. Transferable is there a path for taking this over? Can this business run when the owner leaves and the buyer jumps into transition? Or maybe, can somebody take over your business without it just crumbling and falling apart? Do you have things like documented systems, trained staff, and others? And do the processes just live in your head, or can somebody come in and hit the ground running? And how we measure this is concepts we call value boosters. The value boosters have to do with how well you would rank in each of these areas. And I would say, think about it, if you can have the exact same financial statements from two businesses that are run very differently. And the risk you run into if you rely on some of these industry rules of thumb or multiples or free online valuation calculators, they far too often miss these value boosters. And you can have a business that shows $2 million in revenue with $300,000 in profit, in cash flow. And you've got two of them that have the same tax return, and they show the same numbers. On one side, you've got somebody who's working 80 hours a week. They open, they close, they do the bookkeeping, they do all the things involved in the service, and they haven't been on a vacation in 10 years. But you can have another business with the exact same financial statements where the owner is barely around, travels a couple weeks every month. Owner doesn't even know how to do the things in the business. And when the owner comes in, the employees are like, "Hey, get out of here, you're bothering us." Which one of those do you think is more likely to sell, and more likely to sell for a higher price, right? Of course, it's the second one. And so the risk is, if you don't dig in beyond just the numbers and look at things like these value boosters we talk about, you run the risk of thinking and getting into this false place of, oh, well, that cold calling broker told me that my business is worth 4 times my cash flow, but we didn't really dig into it. So here on this slide, I talk about each booster is really, it's a lever, and when it can pull your business up that value mountain to a higher valuation if it's good, but if it's not, it can drag you down the slope into discounted offers, that zone of, or the canyon of discount doom and despair. And that's where deals go to die. And what I'd like to do here, give you a really quick overview of some of these boosters, the way I see them. Again, you ask other advisors, they may have differing opinions. I break these into 16 and I break them into each of the VST, the valuable, sellable, transferable. So when we look at the boosters tied to being valuable, the first one we look at is trajectory. What is the history of the company? Are you on an upward trend? Are you a downward trend? Are you flat? Of course, buyers want to see not only that upward trajectory, but they want to feel like that will continue. The second one we look at is profitability. Are you making sufficient margin? Josh had talked a little bit about dealing with the devil of Walmart. That's not always very profitable business, is it? And we see this a lot. I do quite a bit of work in the outdoor sports industry where Walmart or other big box is the temptation. People feel like that's the golden goose, that's the prize, because they get so much extra in revenue, but it's not profitable revenue. And it's not profitable from the beginning. And then when returns start happening, and it turns into a mess. So we want to see not only are you making lots of revenue, but is it profitable? Are you making sufficient margin to keep running your business? The third one we look at in this area is accuracy of records. The best way to explain this is, are you running your accounting from a paper bag full of receipts that you turn into somebody at the end of the year, or worse yet, just do taxes on your own? Or do you have somebody running your books? Are they in QuickBooks? Is somebody actually making sure that what you're entering into your accounting system and your tax returns is valid and accurate information? And the fourth year, we talked a little bit about this in terms of the size of cash flow. Again, that's what picks the mountain. So those are the four we look at here in the V section. In the S section, I apologize, these all showed up on one slide. I don't have any fancy ways to sneak them, but I'll take them one at a time. In the sellability, remember, this is the sexiness. Does a buyer want to come in and buy this business? Is it something they'd be proud of? Are they going to look at this and be like, yeah, I can see myself owning that? Or are they like, no, that's a dog, I don't want that. We start with the brand. And when we look at brand, it's not just a pretty logo, but frankly, in today's day and age, it's more of what shows up when somebody Googles your company. And so part of that is, it is partly logo. It's partly what does your website look like? We still run into people who have websites that don't show up on mobile phones. And if you didn't know this, you should. It's something like 85% of website visits come from mobile devices today. And still there's people who, oh, we'll get to that. Buyers will run. Another piece on there worth noting when we look at brand is, what are your reviews look like? Now, it's not the end of the world when you don't have a perfect 5-star rating on Google. In fact, I think people will believe a 4.7 much more than they'll believe a 5. But these are the things, right? Put yourself in the shoes of a buyer who's looking. They find out your company's for sale. They sign an NDA. They get a pitch book, and they look, and if the first impression they get before they even talk to you is a bunch of garbage on the internet, that a bad brand, they're not going to want to pursue you. Next, we would look at offering differentiation. Simply put, are you doing something that is unique? Or, to be really snarky about it, why in the hell would I give you $2 million for this business if I can just go create my own version of it tomorrow for $100,000 and be up to your level relatively quickly? Scalability has to do with, is there still room? Are you at the top of the plateau of growth? Have you taken all the growth out of the market, or is there still a path to make this business get bigger? We look at quality of earnings, and for the number nerds out here, I don't mean the same way private equity folks do this new report they try to gouge you for that they call quality of earnings. This just has to do with, do you have recurring revenue or reoccurring revenue? Do you have contracts, or do you have to fight like hell to get every customer to come in every day to buy? Are you getting people to buy multiple times, more often? Do you have them on a subscription? Things like this. Next, we have the technology stack, the tech stack. If you don't have a CRM, you're in big trouble. I don't even want to explain what it is. If you don't know what that is, email me separately. I will help you for free. You need to have this in this day and age. We're also looking here next at owner dependence. What happens if the owner, or if you as an owner can't, won't, or don't show up to work tomorrow? Will that business still run? Customer acquisition system. That simply means, do you have a process for bringing in new customers, new clients? We too often see the owner as the chief rainmaker, the chief salesperson, that this business cannot exist without the relationships of the owner. And finally, we look at operational infrastructure. How do you deliver the things, whether it's product or service? Are you stuck with a single supplier? Do you have multiple suppliers? We run into plenty of clients that sell a thing manufactured overseas, and then something like a tariff happens, or the overseas provider factory burns down, and they've got nowhere else to get it, and the business dies overnight. So that's the super high level. If there's questions, ask on those. And actually, as part of the resources, I've actually got a full white paper on this that you all can have that really goes in depth on these. I guess I should have led with that, but here it is. And then finally, in this transferability booster section, there's 4 more we look at here. That has to do with people. What is the team? Are they empowered? Do you have employees, managers that can run this business when you leave? Second, we have systems. Do you have standard operating procedures? Do you have ways that things get done so the whole business doesn't collapse when you leave? And remember here on T, this is transferability. This has to do with, can the buyer operate this business after the closing? Sure, they can get through financing. Sure, they think it's cool, they want to own it, but can they really do it? And to do that, you need people, you need a team, you need systems and procedures. Capital. This is one of the biggest ones that hits, especially resort towns here in Colorado. You imagine the fact pattern of, you've got a store on the main drag in pick your Steamboat. You've got a place on Lincoln. You own the real estate. You've had it for 20 years. You've paid down the mortgage. You bought it for a couple $100,000. It's worth a couple million now, but you're not paying yourself any rent. And so you're in here saying, oh, my business is worth this multiple of cash flow, and then we're going to add on the $4 million of real estate. But the problem is, and this happens both with do-it-yourself sales, it happens with brokered sales too often too, that I see, that people forget to look through the buyer's lens, and the buyer's going to have to acquire that real estate at your $4 million cost now, which means they're going to have to pay a mortgage on it. And we've seen, it takes 2 hands for me to count how many times I've seen a deal at the closing table or almost to the closing table, and people forget the part that the mortgage needs to get paid, and it's not a viable business anymore because they forget that minor little detail, or that little piece that ends up killing the deal, because we've gone from a $1,200 a month mortgage payment or no mortgage payment up to $8 or $10 or $12 or $14,000 worth of mortgage payment when we factor in the new real estate cost. And this happens, we've seen it in things like power sports dealers, where there's floor planning loans that happen, or lines of credit where the owner or the seller's been around for so many years, the banks love him, and the new buyer comes in and the banks raise the rate on a line of credit from 2% to 20%. And then finally, legal. You have to have your legal pieces in order. You can't transfer the business if you don't have your operating agreements lined up. If you have a partner that you promised equity in, years ago who raises their hand right before closing and says, "Hey, where's my slice?" And we'll cover more of this in the white paper. I'm starting to run long, and Josh is going to yell at me. So here, really the idea is, how can you stack the deck in your favor to not only be in the 20% that sell, but the 20% of the 20% that sell, not only for what they're worth, but on terms that are favorable, that you can walk away and keep your chin up. So the question for you, do you want to gamble with those odds? Do you want to just figure it out later, or are you ready to get that deck stacked in your favor? And actually, one of the other bonuses we've got for you at the end here, we've got the I call it the Exit Worthy Guidebook. We cover some of this too with some exercises. So you only get to sell your business once, and whoever it ends up being, you need to recruit a team to guide you through this process. It's not a solo mission. This is a team sport. And if you want to win, you need to have a strategy with the right players on your team. And you almost have to think of it like an estate plan, like a will. I mean, most of you on this call, you better should have a will, should have an estate plan, and you have that even though you don't plan to die today or in the near future. Same with an exit strategy. Even if you don't plan on selling or exiting your business in the near future, you at least need to understand this so you can have control of this and not be reactionary when that time comes. And part of that means putting a team together that represent your interests, that understand what you want to do. I didn't get into it today, but there's a lot of, well, actually Josh did, the motivational factors of what's more important to you, getting the most amount of money or the right legacy, taking care of customers, employees. You need to think through all of that, because otherwise someone else is going to do it for you later. So having a team is super important. This would be the part, if we're in the room, I have this really fun exercise I'll just tell you about, but I would have some of you stand up and I'd pick on you. I'd be a really big jerk about it too, right? And I'd call you out one by one. I'd get 5 to stand up. I'd say, "What's your name? What kind of business do you run? Do you understand kind of what you want to sell your business for?" I wouldn't make you say it, but, and then I'd sit you down one at a time until there's only one standing, to show you that 4 out of 5 aren't going to sell. And it really hits hard. I probably didn't explain it super well here today, but just keep that in mind. Imagine that room of me slowly standing you up. "Oh, you got this business. What does it mean to you? Who else would be impacted by a successful exit?" And then we sit you down. "Your business was too dependent on you. You hired the cold calling business broker. You had supplier issues, right? You wanted way too much money and burned the market." And then we crown a champion at the end. But the reality is, this is your hard work, your dreams, everything you've worked so hard for. You don't want to just leave it on the table because you avoided the uncomfortable part of having some conversations and planning for that exit. And we'll skip this next one. But here, I think Cece agreed to send these slides out, but if you want to grab a picture of this QR code, I've got the Exit Worthy Guidebook for you all. I've got the 16 Value Boosters white paper. And then if you really want to get into it, I've got a quick little quiz you can take that talks about where you stand and how you do. So that's what I've got, Josh. I'm only a couple minutes over.
Awesome. No, that was great. Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it. All right. I don't see any questions. Once again, this is obviously a very sensitive topic for most people. People don't want to just say, "Hey, how can you tell me how to sell my business," especially in a small town. So, feel free to reach out to both of us separately. As a coach, I guarantee 100% confidentiality. That's the business I'm in. Ben is as well. So, please feel free to reach out at any time. All right, I'm going to now share again. Oop, at the beginning, let's go to. All right, so let's talk about some common transition options for a lot of businesses. Um, so, if family succession is an option for you, it's wonderful. Of course, as long as it makes sense. The next generation has to be interested, capable, and aligned with your values. And it doesn't have to be to your kids. It can be to other relatives, of course. And it can be tricky to navigate this because there could be a potential conflict between active and non-active family members. And of course, within the business, you have your family and non-family members. So, but once again, there are a lot of family successions. A lot of small businesses will sell to a co-owner, a partner, or a key employee, somebody already involved in the business. And that's going to provide a smooth transition, less disruption, often maintain staff loyalty and culture. Potential downside is in these deals, sometimes there's a financing risk. Financing can be challenging. Sometimes the owner has to hold a note to finance part of the sale. Selling to an outside buyer, such as another person, a company, a corporation, or private equity is good if you're seeking maximum value, or if you don't have an internal successor. Usually provides a cleaner break and gives you access to a larger buyer pool. And these deals can take longer to close because there's more of a due diligence process if the buyer's not that familiar with the area we live in or the business itself. You've got mergers and strategic sales. Could be a competitor, a similar business that can provide more value because 1 + 1 can equal 3 if both companies have growth opportunities and potential cost savings. Challenges here can be confidentiality leaks or culture clashes between companies. And then an orderly wind down or liquidation is always an option, and it's often not the preferred option. But I've seen clients that have been satisfied with this. It's common in owner-dependent businesses. I worked with a dentist. He wanted to sell his practice, and he received offers which required him to work for 3 more years for the new owner. And when he considered all the factors, he decided that, well, I'm going to work 3 more years for myself. I'm going to wind down the practice the way I want to wind it down. He made a little bit less money, but he went out on his terms. And then he worked out a deal to sell or move his clients to another dentist. So, some people they don't want to work for others. They can't imagine their business in others' hands. And if this is your only option, there are still ways you can maximize value if you do an orderly wind down. Okay, so quickly, I don't know if there's any folks in the virtual room here that are considering the next generation. You're probably too young to consider this today. But one thing I want to mention is if you are doing this, then you have to take a real objective view and get an outside perspective, because I was in a family business and owners think they know what's best for their kids. We make a lot of assumptions about our kids. Is there a desire? Is there capability? Is there a readiness? What are the financial implications if the family business struggles? Is this something that's best for the business or just best for the family? Okay. I mentioned that core values index earlier. I also work with DISC. Okay. There's tools where you can identify the natural strengths and gaps and determine if someone is meant to take over a business. I worked with an HVAC owner, and he wanted to evaluate if one of his sons was right for succession. Well, as it turns out, his son had different skills and interests and decided to go to a college and take a different path. So, that's something to keep in mind with the next generation. And then in many cases, in towns like Steamboat, transitioning to a partner, manager, or employee is the best option. When choosing a successor, though, make sure you've got proven leadership, a commitment to the company's mission and culture, and of course, integrity. You can teach somebody business skills. You can't really teach them character. Um, and once again, assess the situation carefully, and make sure you have a structured plan so everything is well communicated. I've seen deals where the buyer thought the owner was exiting on the sale, but then he decided to stay. Um, Caused kind of a ruckus. I've witnessed a situation where, a buyer and seller did not agree on how quickly the note the buyer was holding had to be paid off. All right. There was no legal contract. Um, Casual relationships can lead to casual or unclear communication, and it will lead to problems down the road. So please, do not save money and not hire legal representation. Just because you know someone and you might trust them does not mean you manage the transaction or process any differently or less professionally. Um, you know, Depending on your industry, that's going to affect your options. Typically on transfer, family businesses are not an industry, but they often stay within the family with emotional attachment and legacy driving the decision. Um, Trades and contractors will often transition to a key employee or other local contractors. Obviously, specific licensing requirements and expertise are going to limit the buyer pool. But these businesses stay locally owned because the relationships and the reputations are local. Professional service firms. You're going to typically transfer ownership to associates or other firms who can scale pretty easily. We've got medical practices. I work a lot with medical practices, and they will often sell to a larger group or corporations. They might have younger associates taking over the practice, depending on the size and situation. In this case, patient continuity, very important. So owner will typically have to stay on several years after the sale. We've got manufacturing and industrial companies. They often look to strategic buyers, private equity or investment groups. These deals can somewhat be easier to value because there's a lot of tangible assets such as equipment. And then we have got ranches, farms, land. These used to always go to either family succession or lease to own buyouts, but that's changing because the next generation is not interested or financially prepared to take over. There's other local ranchers also looking to consolidate. So, Ben, if you're still on, one thing I want to mention are some local considerations. It's one thing to, look online and say, hey, this is what I typically would do to sell my business or what my business be worth. But can you talk for a few minutes on, what are the conditions in Steamboat likely going to affect options for small business owners?
Yeah, I think there's a handful of factors, right? And on one end, you've got people who are targeting or they hear about private equity and these Wall Street buyers that come in and pay ridiculously high prices for different businesses. The problem with those groups is in a market like Steamboat is one, there's very few targets that those groups actually want to come in and acquire, just in terms of size of the business and profitability and some of the other attributes. Two, selling to private equity isn't always what it's cracked up to be. You hear the stories of the big payday, but I like to tell people that you have to be careful. Sometimes selling to private equity is like committing a felony. And then they giggle and, what do you mean? It comes with a 3 to 5 year sentence. So they'll promise you this big number. They'll give you some of the money now, but you're stuck with them for 3 to 5 years working for some 28-year-old punk that came out of Bain or Kinsey or some sort of big consulting group, where you've got a boss that's over here telling you've got to hit these margin numbers in order to achieve the rest of the sale price you've been promised. So the private equity stuff is kind of a mess. The other end is you get people who, if you're not careful with confidentiality, somebody hears at the end of the bar that your company is for sale, you start getting all of the other locals coming in, walking around your shop, asking your employees about how much the business is for sale for. So really, a lot of times you want to be able to find the right mix. You have to work on a confidential basis. You have to run what we call running a process, right? You can't, most of the times you can't just put a sign up in front of the business and say, hey, restaurant for sale. Restaurants get especially hard hit by this because everybody starts whispering and nobody comes in. One of the unique buyer avatars we see in resort towns and Steamboat especially right now is, people who are looking for what I call the quasi-retirement. So people coming from a national scale that say, I'm tired of living in this big city. I love it here in Steamboat. I want to be here. And a lot of times we can work with a buyer of that profile to help them come in and acquire a business. Now, they're not going to stroke the biggest check. Sometimes there's some complicating factors of, are they really going to move here, or are they just going to waste a bunch of time? So there's a lot of pieces that go into it, but really the smartest thing you can do on these is go through this exercise, just like you're talking about, of who is the right type of buyer, but think about that long before you get an offer. This is part of your plan. It starts with, what's my motivation? What do I want to do after my exit? What am I willing to do in terms of transitioning the business? And then we look at what types of buyers and what deal structures fit that. What I think the big error is when you race into, well, let's just hurry up and get it on the market and see what happens. You lose your leverage and you lose your ability to run the process to the right types of buyers. It's like tying the wrong fly onto the end of your line when you're fishing. Like, if that bug isn't in that river, it doesn't matter.
All right, that's great. Okay. All right, moving on. Let's go through, you got a plan in place, you've got a deal in place, and now you want to get your deal to the goal line. So what should you focus on during the transition? Don't wait, keep the momentum going, make sure everyone's prepared, train your family, your partners or employees before handing over control. You can create leadership development plans to get them to along the way. Build those operating procedures and systems so the business can run without you. You want to reduce that tribal knowledge. That's the info that's only in your head and no one else can access. Have honest, transparent communication. Keep the messaging consistent. Consider phasing the transition or gradually transitioning responsibility or decision-making authority if you can. Make sure those relationships are secured, customers are notified. Some owners get emotionally checked out once they have a sale in place, an agreement in place. They start visualizing the money and what they're going to do with it, and they just kind of lose interest. But you owe it to yourself, your team, your legacy, your customers to finish strong. Be a great leader. It's always important to be a good leader, but the eyes are on you right now. I don't care if there's people in your business that are not stakeholders. You want to show everyone that the change is coming and you're adaptable and they're going to follow. All right. Empower your employees. They could be stressed out, not knowing what's next. Be transparent, be a stable force, be a listener. You definitely at this time, if in doubt, over communicate. Okay. And then we're going to go quickly through some legal and tax considerations. So you're going to consult with legal counsel on the structure of the sale, but you really, Ben mentioned this, you really want to be buttoned up legally. You got to have a clear-cut sell agreement. You got to make sure those customer contracts, the vendor contracts, the licenses, the leases are assignable. All right. these will kill a deal. And usually these are the things that get dealt with right before closing. So you don't want to, get to closing and find out that important lease isn't assignable. Okay, it can cause real trouble. If you have trademarks or patents, make sure they're registered properly and in the business's name, not yours. Confirm your benefit plans are in order, your labor law compliance. You don't want lingering HR issues. And of course, if there's any pending legal action, environmental issues, they're going to reduce buyer confidence. Nothing will scare off a buyer quicker than potential legal trouble. I promise you that. And then let's not forget about our accountants. Your CPA should have a list of everything that needs to get covered. The type of sale and deal structure is going to have tax consequences. It might be an asset sale or a stock sale. What you really care about is what you bring home. So deal structure matters. If it's a family transfer, estate or gift taxes should be considered. If it's a lot of land or a lot of valuable assets, some sellers might be willing to accept payouts over years, which might lessen their tax burden, and that might be the only way they can finance a sale. But what I've learned over time is, if you prepare early with tax and legal advisors, you can often save a lot of money, 20 to 40% on the sale price if you're buttoned up. So please keep that in mind. Real quickly on valuations, there's a lot more which Ben said that goes into it, but there's a few approaches. A buyer's going to look at a combination of, what you're making, where you stand in the market, what your cash flow is, EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, is a common foundation for determining value, right? It's gonna give a clear picture of a business's earning power, a true measure of operational performance, and it's easy to compare companies through their EBITDA. And then there are industry multiples which are considerations. Now, what's interesting is, Ben was mentioning his levers, and you've got these tangible factors which establish your earnings base. And these are the quantitative and easy to interpret things: your finances, your balance sheets, your cash, your debts, your customer lists, right? These are tangible, okay? But then you have your intangibles. And this is what establishes the multiple. And, you could have okay financials, but a great brand, and that makes your business more attractive, right? Finance professionals are really comfortable understanding and analyzing numbers. If expenses are too high, let's cut expenses, right? But how do you increase loyalty and brand recognition and company reputation? So, buyers are going to look at risk versus reward. So these intangibles, okay, consider them whether you're selling your business today or you never plan to sell it down the road, because you're not going to be able to flip a switch one day, decide to sell your business, and have improvement overnight. Okay, we're gonna, real quickly, I wanted to use this as an example, and I've worked with vets, and I kind of wanted to use these because medical practices can sell it a high valuation. But, quickly, here's just an example of how an owner-dependent business will be worth less than a owner-independent business. Looking at a veterinary practice that earns about $500,000 in EBITDA. So, scenario one, you've got an owner-dependent practice where the vet sees everybody knows him, he's the relationship they have, and he's looking at 3 to 4 times earnings. The next scenario is an owner-independent practice where there's several vets or associate veterinarians that have so now the patients or the clients have a relationship with the practice and not just the owner. So there's less risk and there's greater growth potential. And here, you're looking at a 5 to 7 times earnings or $3 million, which is 1.5 million more in value than the owner dependent practice, just due to owner dependence. So think if you're a veterinary practice and you're able to bring in an associate or not make the practice only on you, how that can affect what your business is worth. Okay, real quick wrap up, and then we'll get to some questions. Have a great mindset. Put yourself in a good frame of mind to make a sound decision. It's an emotional decision. And don't let emotions and short-term pressures lead to permanent decisions. Start planning now, or think about it. Think about how you can build your business value to reap the benefits later. Lean on those advisors. Prepare, lead, and communicate. Be an effective leader once you have a deal in place. And then focus on all those value boosters that Ben mentioned. Because once again, those are the things the buyers are looking for. And of course, it's what the buyers are looking for that matters most in the valuation. It's not how much money you need. All right. Let's see if we have any questions here. Okay, Ben, do you see the chat?
I do.
Okay, so do you see this? Where does intellectual property fall into value?
Yeah, and I tried to answer that one.
Oh, did you respond?
Yeah, so there's two ways to look at value, like two fundamental ways. You can either auction all your stuff off, sell it, I guess. I used to say Craigslist, but now I guess it's Facebook Marketplace, right? That's the floor of your valuation. If somebody's going to pay you more, if they're going to pay you a multiple based on cash flow, they're paying you because all of these assets create more money and more value. And so what you can't do is go in and take one of these multiples of cash flow and then start adding things. And I see it a lot. The biggest error I see in this one actually isn't intellectual property, it's inventory, where people will take what's a commonly accepted multiple, then say, oh yeah, by the way, we're adding inventory to it too. It's tough love that if your advisor or your broker isn't giving you that advice at the beginning and they're just like, oh yeah, just whatever you want, add it on. It's tough. It feels good now because it's easy, but buyers will see through that, particularly whether it's inventory or IP. Buyers in this Main Street range who are using SBA financing that they use so much, the SBA underwriters and appraisers kick that out. And so you really have to have tough conversations about it. But circling back, IP in terms of websites and email lists and these sort of things, I include those under brand. Those are reasons why somebody will buy. It's not an add-on. It's not a line item that goes on after we come up with a percent or with a multiple. It's if it's strong, it's a reason why I would justify something like, a 3.5 times multiple over a 3 times multiple for a given business.
Okay. How and when can you communicate succession plans to employees without creating speculation, anxiety, potential retention? How about customers? I find that the best way to do that is just be clear and honest and upfront, and usually it goes fine. It's when you try to hold things back or you get stressed out about telling them and they see it. But any insight there, Ben?
So the old school, the way I learned this, almost 20 years ago when I worked in the first brokerage firm I joined, was that you never tell anybody until the day after closing or after closing happens. And I don't think that works anymore. And in some cases, you don't tell frontline employees that don't need to know, but certainly, like we're doing a deal right now with a medical practice where we've got the senior management team involved, and it's not a huge company. It's a $3 or $4 million transaction, but we would have a much tougher time getting the right outcome for our seller client if we didn't involve the general manager, the heir apparent within the business. And so that old school way of thinking of not involving anybody, I think is just that. It's old school. It's antiquated. I would challenge owners, and I do challenge owners to think through well, how do we involve your key managers? How do we let them know that, I mean, most of the times they're smart. They know you're looking at selling. They're like, oh, you're old as shit. You're on your way out anyways. Or you're burnt out. We can tell. And if you let them know there's a path forward and how important they are, and say, look, I'm going to give you a bonus. Like we love creating stay bonuses for people, and talking to a seller about, look, if you offer 10 grand, 20 grand, some sort of amount that's meaningful to this employee, to say, look, we want you to stick around. We're positioning you as the general manager. And if you hang out for 12 months after this sale, I've got a $20,000 bonus coming for you. You'd be amazed how most of the time that turns into one of the biggest advocates and allies you have. We just did it in an ice cream retail and manufacturing closing that we closed a few weeks ago. Of that is what pushed the buyer over the edge, was how awesome and cooperative the two key employee, like management level key holders were.
Okay. We got one more. I know it's 10:30. Is anything changed for service-based or event-based businesses? Any insight there? Obviously, there's no inventory. There's not a lot of tangible assets in an event or service-based business.
We've done a lot lately. I've got a significant client base, both in my law firm and the advisory firm here, with people who are doing services and using the internet to deliver services, whether it's coaching, training, consulting, those kind of things. We've seen a lot of people interested in that for side hustles. The multiples don't necessarily change too much, other than that if you remember on my value mountains, better booster scores get a better sellability score, makes people want to come in and take these things over. And by nature, I see that a lot of service businesses have better tech stacks. Although I think professional services, throwing myself under the bus here too, law firms, accountants, CPAs, tax people are traditionally way behind in some of this. So they'll see a much lower multiple a lot of the times, but it's not so much tech to me. It's more of owner dependence of, well, if you own a law firm that makes $500,000 a year because you're because you're working 40 hours a week but billing 60, if you know what I mean. Buyers doesn't want to come in and take that. That's a job, not a business.
Okay. All right, I think that's it. Thank you very much for joining. Once again, any other questions or comments, you can reach out to us separately. Sorry we ran over a couple minutes, CC.
No problem. Thank you guys. I want to thank everyone for your participation, and a huge thank you to Josh and Ben. This is incredibly valuable. The resources are great. I will be sharing the presentation, the slides, and additional resources via email this afternoon. And just a quick few upcoming sessions in our business education series. We have a Preparing for Peak, a winter lodging, tourism, and industry outlook coming up October 29th, a small business tax essentials beyond the basics coming up November 5th, and a financial literacy workshop on savings coming up November 18th. I'll include those registration links in my email as well. But thank you guys so much. This was wonderful. I appreciate your time, and have a wonderful day, everyone.